right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the world's most exciting classroom. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. I say this every week, and I say every week we're going to stick to our hour plan, but we always end up going a little bit over because we have so much stuff jam-packed into the world's most exciting classroom every week, especially since we're back to our full 1 hour. So you may recall over the summer, we were doing 30-minute events while classrooms and students were at home. We were still sailing across the South Pacific, and we were doing our 30-minute events, leaving out experiments and Kahoot quizzes and less guest speakers than usual. But now we are back 1 full hour every week. We had a great event last week as we sailed from Tonga to Fiji, and we are now, the Oosterschelde Day is now in Fiji. So Suva, the largest city on the largest island in Fiji, is where the ship is right now. Tomorrow, the ship will be setting sail again, and we will be making our way to Auckland. So we'll be heading to New Zealand. But then in New Zealand, we need to take a little break. We will have 3 weeks of maintenance in New Zealand. The ship has just crossed the Pacific. There has not been a lot of time for maintenance, a lot of supplies and things like that. We'll be refilling our fuel. So there will be about 3 weeks in Auckland where the ship will be in port. We will still have the world's most exciting classroom, connecting with speakers across New Zealand and Australia and other places, but the ship will be standing still. So don't be surprised if you don't see it moving on the map. So speaking of the map, I'm going to share my screen quickly here, and let's do a quick catch up on what's been going on since we last connected. Let's make that a little bigger. There we go. So here we go. We have Tonga down here. And we spent some time sailing. It wasn't very long. It only took us a few days to get in between Tonga and Fiji. And then we spent a little time at Vavau here before we made our way down. And now here is where we are docked. So I've got a few little pictures here that I can share. Let me click on a couple. So these are updated in real time via WhatsApp from the ship. So here's a nice shot with the 3 front sails up. You can see the largest sail is up here. So we had a little bit of wind on this day. If I click on another one here, we have a little test here. This was the man overboard drill. So you can see someone in their element, their survival suit, and they're practicing getting them in and out of the water. That's pretty cool. And then we have another spot here. They had some nice wind and bring them in from port. We've got a little bit of the sails up, and they are taking advantage of as much as they can. Another shot here. Right before they arrived in Suva. All right, so that is where we are. Now, our speaker for today, I'm really excited to have joining us. So you may remember last week, Grant talked a little bit about some of the volcanoes they passed at Tonga. And those are pretty much the closest we were going to get to any active volcanoes. So I thought this week it would be pretty cool if we talked a little bit about volcanoes. And I could think of no one better than my friend George Kourounis to come and join us. George is a Canadian explorer. He's an adventurer. He's an explorer in residence with the Royal Canadian Geographical Society. And George has pretty much done it all, from chasing hurricanes and blizzards and tornadoes to hosting his own TV show, Angry Planet. He has visited volcanoes around the world, lowered himself down to lakes of lava. So George knows a thing or two about volcanoes. He was even married on the side of a volcano. So I'm going to bring George in with us right now. Here we go. George, how are you?
I'm great, Joe. Good to see you. Great to be here.
Yeah, George, great to see you. And we just snagged you because you were just Greenland sailing through the Northwest Passage. So we just got you.
I've only been home for a couple of days, and I'm happy to be here. And I've spent a lot of time in the South Pacific and in Tonga specifically. There's lots to talk about.
All right. Well, from the cold now into the fire. Let's let you take over for a little bit, George. I can't wait.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Joe, and welcome everybody. The South Pacific is an amazing place, and if you've been following the ship, you know that the waters there are absolutely beautiful. But it is also one of the most geologically active places in the world. And we're going to talk about it, specifically what's going on in Tonga, or what does go on in Tonga from time to time. So let me, just get set up right here. There we go. And now that should be working. There we go. So down in the bottom, sort of just left of center, you can see there where it says Tonga Trench. And that is part of the Pacific Ring of Fire. And this is where most of the world's volcanoes happen. And volcanoes typically happen in a couple of different types of places on Earth, usually where you have two of those tectonic plates rubbing together, or one is being pushed down into the Earth by another plate. And that's exactly what's happening here. So the entire Pacific Ocean is one giant floating island of rock that is basically floating on top of the mantle of the Earth. So you've got this liquid rock underneath, this soft, sticky, liquidish rock. And then you've got the crust sitting on top. And that's where we live. And then on top of that crust in the Pacific Ocean is all of that water. But that plate is actually moving around and it's bumping into the other plates. And that is happening in the area of Tonga. And because of these collisions, we get a lot of lava or magma that comes to the surface and becomes lava. And very specifically, I want to talk about one volcano in particular. And it's got the craziest name. Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai volcano. I know it's a mouthful, very hard to say, but it's actually kind of easy. Hunga Tonga Hunga. And then just think, a pie. Like you've just discovered that there's a pie suddenly in your kitchen, right? Hunga Tonga Hunga, a pie. And this is the most active and I would dare say the most dangerous volcano in Tonga. And this picture that you're seeing is of one of the eruptions that happened in 2022. And this wasn't even the big eruption. And we're going to talk about all of this. So strap in, fasten your seatbelts. This is going to get a bit crazy because this volcano did some stuff that we've never seen volcanoes do before. You can see in this picture, there's a giant explosion. You can see a bit of the island there at the bottom. This explosion went very high into the atmosphere and even generated lightning. When you have these ash particles, these little bits of rock that get exploded out of the volcano, they rub together, kind of like when you rub your shoes on the carpet and touch a doorknob, you get that little static spark. But imagine that times 100 million. That's what happens in some of these volcano eruptions. And this wasn't even the big one. So where are we talking about here? Well, currently the ship is in Fiji, working its way southwest towards Auckland, New Zealand. But it was just recently in Tonga, there to the southeast of Fiji. And that is where on the 15th of January. And this is what the eruption looked like from the International Space Station. So if you were an astronaut looking down at planet Earth, you would see this massive brown and gray explosion, like a giant bomb went off in the middle of nowhere in the South Pacific. And that's kind of what happened. It was like Mother Nature's atomic bomb. And here we've got a progression of photos from space, from an orbiting satellite, where you can see it started off really, really small and then got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then just got huge. Now, in some places, like in Hawaii or Iceland, you'll typically get what we call effusive eruptions, where the lava is very fluid. It flows almost like water. And that's how we get these lava flows and these lakes of lava. You've seen these fountains of lava in Iceland forming these rivers of lava. That's because the lava is very thin, kind of like, not quite like water, but certainly thin. When you have really sticky lava, then it sticks to itself and the pressure can kind of build up because the lava can't flow. And if the pressure builds up too much, then you get these massive explosions, like at Mount St. Helens or Mount Etna or here in Tonga. So this explosion was the biggest eruption in the 21st century that we've had so far in the 21st century. It was the largest recorded since 1991 when Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines erupted. Now, you're all too young to remember that, but I remember it was an absolutely massive, massive explosion. and hundreds of times more powerful than the first atomic bombs that were detonated in the desert in the United States during World War II. So we're talking just immense explosions. And to put this into perspective, here I've got a map of Florida and California, and I've superimposed that explosion from Tonga as if it were to happen in these densely populated areas. So here you can see the explosion is huge. It's covering a good portion of Florida and Southern California, but that's not even the full extent of it. It actually the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right? It's hard to wrap your head around the idea of how big this was. But when you put it in a place where you've got an idea of the size, it gives you the full perspective of how massive this eruption was. So it would have covered all of not Southern Ontario, that's where I live, Southern California, and certainly most of Florida. Absolutely massive. And you can see it spread out even further. So I'm having a difficulty here just trying to find the words to describe how big this explosion was. Luckily, it was in the middle of nowhere. And to give you an idea of how high the explosion was, here's like a cross section of our atmosphere. So where all of our weather happens, it's all at the bottom there in the troposphere. And you can see Mount Everest is there. Cumulonimbus cloud on the left, that's a thunderstorm cloud. And they can grow absolutely huge, up to 10 kilometers or higher. And the ash from this eruption went up to this point up here. So much higher than Mount Everest, much higher than a commercial jet flies, higher than weather balloons. We're talking almost into space. So if you see a meteor streaking into the sky like a shooting star at night during a meteor shower, that's about how high, 60 kilometers almost, this explosion was. Just unfathomable. (2022) and no. And that is indeed this pressure wave that was caused by so just the blast from this eruption was picked up by all of these weather sensors. Here you can see across North America, we've got all these weather sensors that are detecting the shock wave from this eruption. And notice how at first, wait for it, it goes from left to right on January 15th, and then on January 16th, you see it going from right to left. That's because this explosion was so powerful, it wrapped around the entire Earth several times, actually. So the explosion went up almost 60 kilometers or 36 miles up in the air. The sound was so loud that it was heard in Alaska, and that's almost 10,000 kilometers away. We think this might be the loudest sound ever made on planet Earth. Krakatoa volcano, when it erupted in 1883, was heard several thousand kilometers away in Australia, and that volcano was in Indonesia. But it looks like this one may have been even louder. It's not confirmed, but it might be. Imagine driving from New York to Los Angeles, and that's not even close to how far away this sound was heard. Like, it's just unbelievable. And that shockwave I talked about traveled around the Earth as many as 4 times. And of course, whenever you have something that powerful, it will create a tsunami. So a tsunami wave happens whenever you disrupt the water in the ocean. So that can happen from earthquakes. It can happen from underwater landslides. If a meteor were to hit the Pacific Ocean, it would create a huge tsunami. And this eruption did cause a tsunami. I'll talk about that in a second. But remember, it also produced a bunch of lightning. And this is a map where you can see the eruption, how it explodes almost up into space. But all of those red and yellow markers there, those are all lightning strikes. So that friction that I talked about, that static electricity buildup in this explosion was so intense, it produced more lightning than any storm ever documented ever. More than any hurricane, more than any thunderstorm. This particular day, this one spot had more lightning than anywhere ever detected ever. It's just, it blows my mind. And to show you sort of what happened, this was the island before it had the big eruption. You can see there's a couple of, you got Hunga Ha'apai on the left, Hunga Tonga on the right. The craters there steaming away in the middle. This was on January 7th. And then it had the small eruption on January 14th. And this is what the island looked like after that. The middle portion was completely obliterated by the small eruption. And then 2 hours later, the big eruption happened, and this is what the islands looked like afterwards. Almost nothing left. The explosion was so big that it just destroyed the center portion of all of those islands there. Just the high ground remains. Again, just kind of trying to stress how big this explosion was. And of course, as we mentioned, it did produce these tsunami waves that did unfortunately inundate some of the nearby islands in Tonga. So here's a before photograph of the this Nomuka village, and here, unfortunately, is the after. And you can see how the wave came in and just destroyed all of this this village. Here's the before, and here's the after. So even if you're nowhere near this explosion, you can still be affected by it because of these tsunamis that are formed. Now, back in 2009, here's a little personal story. I set foot on this volcano. It had an eruption, a smaller eruption, that exploded up from the sea. The volcano was completely underwater at this point, and 80% of the world's volcanoes are underwater. And it created a brand new island. And I wanted to be the first person to ever set foot on this island. So I flew to Tonga. I was in New Zealand at the time, rented a boat, sailed out to the volcano, swam ashore, and set foot on this brand new island. And behind me there, you can see there's the crater where the explosion initiated from. It's full of hot water right now. And the ground was warm to the touch. And you can see the steam coming off of the volcanic lake there. That's not the ocean. That's the actual lake that formed in the middle of the crater. And all of this land is brand new. More people have stood on the moon than have been on this island at this point. And the rocks were so brittle, I could pick them up and they would just crumble in my hand. So just, it's an amazing place in terms of all of the had one of the biggest eruptions that we've ever seen. It's a very good thing that the ship was nowhere near when that happened. And if the volcano had erupted the way it did in 2002, when I was there in 2009, well, I would have been immediately turned to dust. There would have been nothing left. I would have been molecules sprinkling across the Pacific Ocean. So these volcanoes are amazing at creating these brand new islands. That's how a lot of islands on planet Earth are created, but they can also be very destructive. They're one of the natural forces that can create and destroy simultaneously. And that's why I find them so fascinating.
All right. George, so cool. I forgot about that story that you were the first to set foot on that island. That's pretty wild.
It was pretty wild. And swimming ashore at that time, I'm thinking, this is the South Pacific. There's lots of sharks that like to patrol around these island drop-offs. I was only able to stay on the island for maybe a couple of hours before it was starting to get dark and had to swim back. And that was it was a pretty scary experience because at any point the island could have just collapsed in a landslide and fallen back in the sea, or the volcano could have erupted again. So the idea is go there, set foot, do what you have to do, and then get out of there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Very cool. Well, thanks for taking us on a little closer look at that eruption, at the volcanoes that we just sailed by. We got a nice view. They looked peaceful, and there was some green on the side, but the Earth is pretty powerful, and that's what you do. You bring kind of those forces of nature, that power of our planet. You bring it to people, so we can see, these processes happening beneath our feet and around the world.
Absolutely.
All right. We're going to play a little Kahoot now. So I'm going to load that up on the screen. While I do that, I want to remind our classrooms tuning in, you can put some questions into the chat on YouTube, and I will ask George some of those volcano questions after our Kahoot. But let me share my screen, and let's get that Kahoot up. Here we go. So today, we want to go to kahoot.it, and then it's going to ask you for a PIN number. You want 6756094. So if you have one-to-one technology at your desk, that's great. You can connect that way with a Chromebook or a tablet. If not, your teacher could pop this up at the front of the classroom for you, and you can shout out your answers to him or her. If you're at home, I know we always have lots of home schoolers tuning in. You can scan that QR code with your tablet or with a phone, and it will bring you in. So George, while we wait for some classrooms, for some students to join, I've got questions coming in already. So let's start with volcano warnings. How far in advance do we usually know about an eruption?
That's a great question. It's very difficult to predict the eruption of a volcano, and it really depends on how closely monitored that volcano is. In places like Iceland, where it's really critical that that the country knows a lot about the volcanoes there, they're monitored very closely, and they can give enough warning to evacuate towns. Like literally, the town of Grindavik was evacuated before these eruptions started. So in a place like that, yeah, you can get a couple of days notice, maybe a little bit more, but there's no guarantee that the volcano will erupt. So it's a very, that technology, that knowledge is still in its infancy right now. If you have a volcano that's not very closely monitored, like the one in Tonga, nobody knew it was going to erupt that big. We had maybe a day's notice, maybe 2 days notice, that maybe it might erupt, and then had this catastrophic explosion. So yeah, it's really a tough thing to do.
All right. I am going to grab one more question before we start our Kahoot. And this one is, can you tell us a couple more volcanoes that you visited around the world besides the Tonga one?
Oh, so many. I've spent a lot of time in the South Pacific, in the nation of Vanuatu, where they have numerous volcanoes there, really beautiful ones with boiling lakes of lava. I've done volcano expeditions in Congo at Nyiragongo volcano. I did the world's first descent of Pacaya volcano in Guatemala. I've been to volcanoes in Japan, in Antarctica, Costa Rica, all over the world, Ethiopia, Iceland, everywhere.
All right, very cool. Okay, we still have a few trickling in, but I think we're going to get it started. There are some multiple choice. There are some true and false. There are all answers that you could get from tuning into George's presentation today. The faster you put in the right answer, the more points you're going to get. And try and get it in nice and quick, because I think the timers for the questions are 20 seconds today. So time is of the essence. So let's get it going. Here we go. Then we'll spend a few more minutes on questions.
Let's see if I can answer these.
All right, here comes the first one. Volcanoes form where tectonic plates move apart, where they stop moving, where they collide, or were there, oops, I put moving apart twice. So move apart, stop moving, or collide. So where are those tectonic plates? Where are those volcanoes forming on those plates? All right, good job, crew. When they're colliding, sometimes they're pushing against each other. Sometimes one is getting pushed under the other one, but it's where they collide. George?
They sometimes can form where they move apart, though. I didn't mention that, but they can sometimes do that in a few places on Earth. So
Intuitively, I knew that. That's why I put move apart twice.
Yeah.
But
I
collide
didn't
definitely
mention
works.
that in the presentation, so
All right, let's jump to our
just
next one.
a little extra knowledge. Yes, it can happen where they spread apart as well. That happens in
Okay.
Central Africa. It also happens in Iceland.
Okay, that makes sense. The Rift Valleys where they're pulling apart in
Right.
Africa.
That's
Okay.
right.
All right, Proud Hair is in first place. Let's go to our next question. It is, where do most eruptions take place? Is it along the African coast? Is it the Pacific Ring of Fire? Is it the Arctic Circle? Or are they evenly dispersed all around the world? We've got a few more seconds to get our answers locked in. Where are they taking place the most? The African coast, the Pacific Ring of Fire, the Arctic Circle, or evenly around the world? All right, good job, crew. George did mention the Pacific Ring of Fire, around the Pacific, where we can find most of that volcanic action going on.
Absolutely.
Snowy Seal still on that top spot. I should remind you that for the winning class, there is a $50 Amazon gift card on the line. An effusive eruption is when the lava is thick and slow. Is that true or is that false? Effusive, the lava is thick and slow. True or false? All right. Did we get that right, George? Effusive is usually liquid, right?
Eruptions happen when the lava is thin and moves quickly.
Excellent. All right. So it is effusive. It's liquid. It's moving faster. What was the term for when it's thick and slow?
Those are more explosive eruptions.
Explosive eruptions. All right. Very cool. Snowy Seal, not letting go. 2 questions to go. True or false? Volcanic eruptions can form new islands. I think we're going to knock this one out of the park. Is that true or is that false? Volcanic eruptions can form new islands. Got about 10 seconds to lock in your answers. All right, that's absolutely true. We know George was the first to step on that island in the Pacific, but they can disappear pretty quickly, can't they, George?
They can appear and disappear and then reappear. Absolutely.
All right, lots going on. And many of you may remember when we were going through the Galapagos and we talked about the hot spot where Fernandina is and how all of those islands kind of move on that conveyor belt over time. So that's really a cool spot. Snowy Seal.
Hawaii.
Snowy Seal's holding on. Most volcanoes are found on land. Is that true or is that false? We're going to find most of our volcanoes on land. We have 12 seconds to get your answer locked in, and then we'll see which class came on top today. A couple more seconds. All right, good job, crew. Most volcanoes are found underwater.
Yes.
Very, very cool. All right, let's look at our podium. In third place, we've got the Bright Pony. In second place, we've got the Snowy Seal.
Oh, Snowy Seal got upset.
They got upset right at the end by Captain Hamster.
Captain Hamster sneaks in at the end to take the lead, to take the win.
Anything can happen in Kahoot on the world's most exciting classroom. No question.
You got to be fast on that answer.
All right. So I'm going to put up a link here really quickly. If you are the class with that hamster, you need to send me a message to classroom@darwin200.com, and then we will send you that gift card. So Captain Hamster, if your teacher can send us a message, we'll send a gift card to your classroom classroom@darwin200.com. All right, George, we're going to squeeze in a few more questions with you. So get in a few more questions into the chat. We have a few here as well, but there is still time to sneak in your burning volcano questions before we log off for today. All right, here we go. So George, do you use any protective gear when you're exploring volcanoes?
Yes, absolutely. My equipment is downstairs right now in my basement, but yes, I frequently wear a special suit that protects me from the heat, and it kind of looks like a spacesuit, but it's the kind of suit that you would wear if you worked in like a steel mill or some kind of factory where you work with molten metal. So it's like a silver suit, It's covered in like an aluminum fabric with a face shield. And I've got gloves, a jacket, I've got pants, and that allows me to get close to these lava flows on these effusive eruptions, and protects me from that radiant heat. Like, you know, if you open the oven after it's been on for a while, you get that blast of heat that comes out. Well, this suit protects me from that. And there's been many times where I've had to wear it down inside volcanoes, standing next to these lakes of lava, where if you didn't have that kind of protection, it would just be too hot. You couldn't stand there at all. And I've actually been able to gather lava samples from lava flows in places like Cape Verde Islands off the west coast of Africa while wearing this suit.
All right. Things froze on my end for a second, but I think I still have you. Okay.
Yeah, no, yeah, I blacked out there for a second, but yes, the lava actually produces a lot of gas, and the gas is. And I'm back. And so I often wear a gas mask to protect me from that as well.
All right. While you were talking, George, I quickly went behind the scenes in our Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants archives, where we do have a video of you
You're so
in
fast, Joe. You're so fast.
that suit. I didn't want to play it while you were talking because you're talking in the background, but let's take a quick look at you in the suit.
I'm explorer and adventurer George Kourounis, and when I explore, I do it by the seat of my pants.
So that video was taken in Vanuatu on Ambrym Island, and it has several of these lakes of lava. And it's one of my favorite places in the world. I've been there many, many times over the years.
All right. Yeah, very cool. We were so grateful you shot that video for us. It's still one of the most amazing pieces that has come back from the field. And you can see why that suit would be so important with your proximity to that lake of lava. Very cool. Okay. Do you know offhand what the most active volcano is right now in the world?
Ooh, great question. There are numerous volcanoes that claim to be the most active. Like some say that Mount Etna is the most active, but it's not really. There are volcanoes that have been continuously active for decades. So it's really hard to say what is the most active. Yasser volcano, which is a volcano where I got married, also in Vanuatu in the South Pacific, it's been exploding every couple of minutes for about 800 years that we know of. Mount Stromboli in Italy has been exploding almost continuously for about 2,000 years that we know of. So it's kind of hard to say. So if I were a betting man, I would put my money on Stromboli in Italy.
All right, fair enough. Well, that's a good segue to the next question, which was, do volcanoes have like a lifespan? An average?
They often do, yes. For example, Hawaii. So the chain of islands that make up the state of Hawaii formed because of this hot spot underneath the Earth's crust. And as the plate over millions and millions of years drifts over that hot spot, you'll get a volcano that forms. And then, so the process goes like this. Undersea volcano creates a new island. That island has an active volcano for a while. And then as that plate drifts and continues moving, that hotspot is now not underneath that original volcano. So that now becomes dormant and eventually extinct. And then the next island forms and the next island. So as you go from west to east in Hawaii, the further east you are, the older the volcanoes are and the less likely they are to erupt. And in the eastern part, on the big island of Hawaii, there's where the current hotspot is. That's where it's sitting right now. So that's where the most active volcanoes are. And the newest Hawaiian island is under the sea. It hasn't broken the surface yet, but there's undersea volcanic activity that's going to create a new island. It already has a name, even though it hasn't formed. That new island is going to be called Loihi when it eventually breaks the surface.
Very, very cool. I love that kind of that history about to happen. And then similarly in the Galapagos, if you're heading towards Peru, you can find islands that had their time in the sun and have now eroded and sunk back beneath the surface. So I think that's pretty wild.
opposite directions. Hawaii, it's west to east. In Galapagos, it's east to west. Yeah.
All right.
Amazing.
George, one more question before we say goodbye for today. And that's, do you have a bucket list volcano that you're still hoping to visit?
Oh, yes, I do. I have numerous ones. Mount Masaya in Nicaragua, I haven't been to yet. It's one of the few volcanoes in the world that I haven't been to that has a lake of lava. So I really want to go there. And Mount Erebus in Antarctica on Ross Island. It also has a lake of lava, but it's very hard to get to, very difficult. It's in Antarctica. I've been to Deception Island in Antarctica, which is also an active volcano, but it's not as active as Mount Erebus. So that's at the top of my volcano bucket list.
Awesome, George. And if people want to follow your adventures, where is the best place to do that?
The best place you can find my website and all my social media links are all on furiousearth.com.
Okay, furiousearth.com. And check out some of George's past adventures and upcoming adventures. We hope you're packing that suit pretty soon and you're getting to some of those volcanoes that are on your list, George.
I'm always working on it. Thanks, Joe. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much for being with us today.
My pleasure.
All right. Well, that was pretty cool. George has definitely explored some amazing places around the world and lucky to see some pretty cool volcanic spots, including Tonga, where the Oosterschelde has just passed by. We're in Fiji now and on our way to New Zealand within probably the next 24 hours. So let's move on to some more of the world's most exciting classroom. We have a new experiment to show you this week. Last week, we had our experiment where we were polishing stones with a rock tumbler. So you still have 1 week to work on that experiment. Send us some pictures of your stones to classroom@darwin200.com. Classroom@darwin200.com. You might have a tumbler in the classroom. You might have one at home. And I also would accept some photos if you have some polished rocks. Maybe you found some at a museum or you were given some as a gift. I would accept that as an example of some polished rocks if you want to send those pictures to classroom@darwin200.com. We have a new experiment you'll have 2 weeks to try in your classroom or at home, and this is with herbs. So splicing, cutting, and growing herbs. You can find these right in your grocery store produce aisle. So let's take a look at this experiment here together. It's just going to take a couple seconds to load on the computer, and here we go.
Welcome back, everyone. In today's experiment, you get to grow your very own herbs and can use them to cook. You could make a pizza or anything you'd like out of them. It's a really fun activity. What we have to do is make cuttings and watch them grow. There are many different types of herbs that you can use for this activity, but I'm going to use basil, mint, and thyme because those are 3 of the herbs that root most easily. The first step in this experiment is to take cuttings from live herb plants. You can do this by buying bags of live herbs. These are available in supermarkets and they're very, very cheap. You can often use the live herbs in the bags, or maybe your mum, dad, school, or perhaps a friend or a neighbour has a herb garden already, and if you ask them nicely, they might let you take a cutting or 2. I'm going to use live plants to make my cuttings, so pretending these are from a herb garden. So snip off a large stem, such as from this basil plant here. This is perfect to make a cutting out of. Make sure that you don't have too many leaves along the length of the stem, then put it into a test tube or beaker of water. I'm going to repeat the process, so we've got a couple of each type of herb, and we'll see how many I can grow. Mint is also a really good herb to use. Let's just take away those little offshoots. One of the reasons why you don't want too many leaves along the length of the stem is if they're underwater, they can rot, and that can actually cause the death of your cutting. Let's get another mint cutting here. We'll remove some of those leaves along its length. Put that in here. And last but not least, some thyme. Let's just remove those leaves along the length of it and put that one in here. I've decided to run this experiment with 2 cuttings of each type of herb, just in case one doesn't succeed. But of course you can do as many or as few as you want. When you're done, Place the setup on a sunny windowsill, and in about 1 to 2 weeks, you should start to see roots develop along the lengths of your cuttings. Send in your photos to classroom@darwin200.com. I can't wait to see how your herbs get on. And I really hope you're able to root some herbs and start your very own herb garden. Join me in 2 weeks to find out how my herbs are growing. Good luck and thank you for taking part.
All right, so there we go. That should be a pretty easy experiment to do in your classroom. You don't need too many supplies. Your teacher or at home, you might have a herb garden you can take a cutting from. You can go to the grocery store aisle and usually find live herbs that can be purchased. So to make your cutting, put it in something like a test tube. I bet you could do it in a solo cup or something like that. Just make sure you keep the stem free of leaves so you don't get too much rot in the container. So 2 weeks to try that experiment, classroom@darwin200.com. We would love to see some photos, whether you try it in the classroom or you try it at home, and then send us in those photos, and we will have some Amazon gift cards that we will send to your classroom, to some of the classrooms who send in their results from the Growing Herbs experiment. Next week, we will see the results from the rock tumbler experiment, and we hope to see some more pictures of your polished stones, whether you tried it over the last 2 weeks at home or in the classroom, or maybe you already have some polished stones at home that you've made in the past, or you got at a museum or something like that. Now, we always like to try and have a live connection with the Oosterschelde. It's tricky right now with the time zone. So right now it's about 2 a.m. in Fiji, so everybody's sleeping. But before I went to bed last night, I had a talk with Grant, one of our researchers on board, and we recorded a video together of his time in Fiji, looking for birds and a couple other cool things he found. So let's take a look at what Grant got up to this week while he was in Fiji.
Hey everybody, Grant here from DARWIN200. We are in Viti Levu, which is Fiji's largest island. And this week, I'm going to be spending a little bit of time off of the Oosterschelde, and we'll be going around and I'm going to be trying to film some of Fiji's rare birds. So today, I just got back from my first major hike. We went in the national park that is one of the largest forest reserves in this island in Fiji. And I was going around looking for some of the endemic bird life that you can find on these islands. And super cool. So I'm going to walk you through some of the highlights here that we saw. First, though, I'm going to show you really quick where I'm staying. So you guys can see now, this is the main pond of the Eco Lodge where I'm staying. And just from my balcony right here, I've been seeing a lot of the cool endemic birds that are in Fiji. It's mostly non-native plants that we have around here, but they're interesting and fascinating, and they've been supporting just enough bird life to keep me interested without even having to go to the major parks. So now I'm going to walk you guys through some of the cool birds that I've seen so far since getting off of the Oosterschelde. This first image here, you can hear, maybe you can hear the parrot in the background. Sorry. But this is a Vanicoro flycatcher. This is the adult here with the navy blue back, and they've got almost like a sort of burnt orange color on their breast. And then the next slide here, this is a young Vanicoro flycatcher, and it was just flitting around in front of my balcony, and it was begging to be fed by its parent. So I was able to get good pictures of both of them there. The next picture here, the next 3 pictures actually are masked parrots. This is an endemic parrot in Fiji. They're really large parrots. They're like, about as big as macaws that you would have in South America. And they're loud. They're just on cue. There you go. There's a call from a masked parrot. They're really cool. They're one of the big fruit distributors around here. So they're going around and they're able to crack these really large nuts that are in some of the native hardwood trees that are here. And we've been pretty lucky just to see so many of them already. In this very last picture here of the masked parrot, there's an adult feeding a young masked parrot. I was watching this adult go through and it was taking these fruits off of the trees. And then it was breaking apart the fruit, swallowing it, and then it was regurgitating the fruit to feed its baby there. And then this next picture here that I have is a Pacific kingfisher. It's one of the most beautiful pictures of a bird that I think I've ever taken. These guys, unlike their name, or unlike what you would think with their name, they instead of eating fish, they're mostly eating things like small lizards. Fiji has a lot of native skinks that are here. They're also eating large insects as they're going around, but they take little breaks on these like little exposed perches, and makes a great opportunity to get a photo of them. The next picture here, I've got these two red and green parrots. These are collared lories. Collared lories are the national bird of Fiji. They're really, really beautiful. And they're also specialized nectar feeders. So they have brush-shaped tips of their tongue, and they'll go around to flowers and just dip their tongue into flowers, and they're able to drink the nectar from flowers. They're also helping to pollinate flowers, just like a butterfly would. So you can kind of think of these guys as, filling a lot of the same roles as things like butterflies and hummingbirds. Then this next picture, Freudian slip there. This next picture is a Peel's or barking imperial pigeon. And these guys are super cool. They're an endemic pigeon that is only found in Fiji. And they have a really cool call, which gives them their name. So it sounds like a barking dog. And I'll pause so we can play an audio here of one of the barking imperial pigeons. And this final image here is not a bird, obviously, but a really cool, oh my gosh. If you guys can hear those birds here, these are honey eaters. I'm still trying to get a good photo of them, but they're such noisy and cool birds that are kind of drowning me out. But this last image here is not of a bird, but it's of an ant spider. So ant spiders, they resemble ants. They move around in a way that's very similar to ants. And they unlike most spiders, their front two legs have these enlarged portions that when they put them together, it almost looks like it's an ant head with two antennae sticking out from the head. So these guys, they walk around like ants and they look like ants so that they can sneak up next to ants and then actually predate on ants themselves. So they're almost like little ant assassins that are disguised just to look like ants so that they can get super close, and they'll pounce on and ambush ants right here. This family is pretty well distributed throughout Australia and Southeast Asia. And it's really cool because I didn't realize that there were any of them here in Fiji. I've seen these guys before in documentaries, but upon reading about it, it looks like they've made it all the way out to Fiji and some of the more remote Pacific Islands. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. I try to get some more material for you guys. Hopefully some good videos of behavior for birds would be really cool. And hopefully eventually you'll be able to see some of this content in the documentary that I'm producing during my time here in Fiji. Anyway, take care, everybody. I hope you're enjoying being back in school and making the most out of the opportunity. And I will see you all the next time.
All right. So shout out to Grant for joining me to make that video last night. He's seen some great endemic species in Fiji. He's got several days to explore and see what he's able to photograph and film for the documentary he's working on land birds on these southern Pacific islands. Now, there's a feature on our map that you might not have seen before that I want to share for you to take a look at. So Grant has been on most legs of the journey, and he has been documenting, doing this incredible global bird census. He must be up over between 500-600 species now, maybe even more. So we'll have to ask him that number next time we got him live. But if you go to the map, you can see there's the picture icon, but there's a bird icon as well. And if you click on that, it highlights these patches of ocean. And when you click on these different patches, you can see what they were seeing on the ship. So you can get the counts of frigate birds and petrels and tropic birds and terns and things that they were seeing as they move to different places around the world. So this is a really cool feature. We haven't really highlighted it enough. It's been a while since we've highlighted it. We've got albatross here along the coast of South America. If I move up here into the middle of the Atlantic, we've got boobies and shearwaters, doves when they stopped on some of the islands. So that's another really neat feature of the map. You can track the bird census as we make our way around the world. So I think we're actually going to finish on time today. We have 2 more things to do, and that is to take a look at our curiosity of the week. So last week's curiosity, we have a little video here with the answer to that curiosity.
Everyone, last week I asked you to try and identify this strange object here. If you remember, I gave you a few clues. It's very heavy and it has a very distinctive pattern, both on this side that's been polished and on this rough side as well. Could you work out what it is? A lot of you sent in answers and quite a few of you got it absolutely right. It's petrified wood. Petrified wood is the wood from trees that lived tens or even hundreds of millions of years ago that have actually become fossilized. The minerals in the wood have been replaced and turned into stone, and that's exactly the case here. If you look really carefully, you can actually see the rings within this ancient tree that was alive millions and millions of years ago. And if I turn this part of petrified wood this side, you can actually see the ancient bark. This is the outer surface of the tree here, just like bark on trees alive today. It's amazing to think that trees such as this were growing millions of years before humans ever walked the earth, and they still do to this very day. Did you guess the correct answer? Let's find out now who won this week's prize. Thank you for taking part.
All right. So we did get some good guesses, but we did have a class in Sudbury, Mixed Parks class, who had the right answer that it is petrified wood. So I will send a message to that classroom after today's World's Most Exciting Classroom event. And to wrap up for today, we need to take a look at a new curiosity. So I have one here in my office that we're going to use for today. We'll get a look at it here. In a second, I'm going to do a closer look here with my cell phone, but we can get a look at this here. I will give you a nice little hint. It is a shell, so that should help you to start figuring out what this curiosity is. You can see it's got some interesting holes that run along there. And then you can see inside it has this absolutely beautiful kind of rainbow, shiny glaze maybe. So it's really cool. And then I have a little bit better look at it here for you with the cell phone camera. So let's take a little closer shot. There we go. So you can see a little bit more of the detail, rough on the inside. Sorry, on the outside. We've got those holes running along the edge. And then nice and smooth with this really kind of iridescent rainbow pattern inside. So that is our curiosity for this week. You have 2 weeks to send, or sorry, a week for curiosities to send your answer to classroom@darwin200.com. You have a week to get your answer to classroom@darwin200.com. What do you think this curiosity is? We have 1 week to get in your answer to the rock tumbler experiment, and you have 2 weeks for our brand new experiment, growing herbs from making a cutting. So that is where we're going to leave it for today. Next week, the ship will be on its way to New Zealand. We will have another connection to share with you. We'll have another guest speaker. We're going to do it on a little bit of a different day because I'm on an expedition towards the end of next week. But then the following week, I will share some of that expedition with you. So that we'll do that in the World's Most Exciting Classroom. But it will be Tuesday next week. Same time, 9 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock in the UK. But it will be on Tuesday, the World's Most Exciting Classroom next week. We'll be making our way to New Zealand, and we'll have lots of stuff, experiments and curiosities, video clips, lots to catch up on. The last thing we'll do before we sign off is a huge shout out to our supporters, our sponsors, our partners, without whom we wouldn't be doing this World's Most Exciting Classroom. We wouldn't be about to set sail for New Zealand. We wouldn't have Darwin leaders on board and training to become future conservationists, and we wouldn't have our research like Grant's birds. We've discovered new species in Rapa Nui. We've mapped coral across the Pacific. There's all kinds of science going on the ship. So we'll end off with a shout out to our sponsors, and hopefully we see you next week on Tuesday.